Hi, I'm Msgr Jim Lisante. Today on Personally Speaking, William McGurn is our guest. He's not only been a chief speechwriter for George W. Bush at the White House, but also writes an op-ed column of great power in the Wall Street Journal. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and William McGurn joins me now. Bill is a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board and writes the weekly Main Street column for the journal each Tuesday. Previously, he served as chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Bill has served as chief editorial writer for the Wall Street Journal in New York. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, holds a BA in philosophy from Notre Dame University, and a master's degree in communications from Boston University. Bill is married to Julie, and together they're the parents of 3 daughters. He's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, his family, his Catholic faith, and about his godson, Jimmy Lai, a media entrepreneur who's in prison in Hong Kong for supporting the pro-democracy movement there, and having cited his Catholic faith in support of his efforts. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, William McGurn. First question, Bill. I had a homily recently in my parish, and I talked to the people about the power of our Jewish brothers and sisters when it comes to defending some of their own. And I said, I wish we had more of that in the Catholic Church. And the specific case I was talking about was someone well known to you, this Jimmy Lai, a co-religionist Catholic guy in Hong Kong in jail for being pro-democracy. For the sake of our listeners around the world, can you tell us something about, first of all, how do you know Jimmy, and what can be done to let China know that we are outraged that this man is being locked away?
Well, I've known Jimmy about 35 years ago when I was living in Hong Kong in the 90s. It was the second time I lived in Hong Kong. This time I was married. And Jimmy had opened a store called Giordano's. It was kind of like the Gap over here.
Uh-huh.
And it was very revolutionary because in Hong Kong then, the middle class really didn't have brands. You could buy a Christian Dior, something, or Ralph Lauren, some very high-end thing, or some very low-end thing, off a street vendor. But they didn't have anything with consistent kind of quality and reasonable prices. So he started this, and then he started up a magazine called Next Magazine, and then Apple Daily newspaper, which were among the most popular magazines and newspapers. And it sort of combined a Wall Street Journal type editorial page on trade and those issues with a more kind of tabloidy news page and everything. It was very, very popular, and it was very pro-democracy. So Jimmy and I would have been friends. We both share an admiration for this economist, Friedrich Hayek, kind of a precursor of Milton Friedman and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we are both very much into Hayek. He's less a technical economist and more kind of humane and talking about, how society organizes itself. And then, so we got to know each other. Jimmy had a habit of inviting news people over to his house for dinner. And I would have always been friends with him, but my wife and his wife really, really hit it off. She comes from an old Catholic Chinese family in Hong Kong. And Jimmy was not Catholic. Like a lot of Chinese, he was really nothing. Mm-hmm. And, at one point, near 1997, she said, you should ask Jimmy if he wanted to convert. He respects you, you should ask him. So I asked him at his house, and he said no. And he said, I'm sympathetic to religion. I'm very sympathetic to the Catholic Church, but I don't feel in my position as head of a lot of media that I could pick one over the other. So, you have to respect the man's choice. You can offer him something, but it's up to him. A week later, I was at his house. He pulled me into a side room and he said, I want to have Jesus Christ in my life.
Wow.
And, he had known the Cardinal, Cardinal Zen. So he talked with the Cardinal. Remember, he's a billionaire. So when he decides to do something, the Cardinal gave him all the stuff to read. He said, I'm taking off a month, 6 weeks. I'll read it all and then get it done. And he was baptized shortly before 1997, before Hong Kong returned to China's rule. And I was his godfather. And so that's kind of been our relationship. And since then, his wife is the godmother of my middle daughter, and my wife is godmother of his daughter. And my 3 daughters are all Chinese. They're all adopted from China. So he's a brother, really. Even though I'm godfather, he's really a brother. Our families are very, very intertwined. And then to bring it to today, he's always been an advocate for freedom, human freedom. And, he was put in jail for his pro-democracy advocacy, and he remains in jail right now. And while in jail, let me just say this, while in jail, he has treated it as a monastery. He is just devouring the Christian classics.
Wow.
I know Cardinal Zen complains now because he says, now when I go see Jimmy, I have to read about 2 hours of St. Ambrose in case he has any questions or Newman. So it's just he's an extraordinary man.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary story, and his wife is part of it. Just their faith is deepening over this. It's not being challenged. Jimmy's remarkably at peace with himself in jail.
Let me ask you, though, Bill, can we, as American citizens, have any influence on our government putting pressure on China to treat him justly?
Well, they're not going to treat him justly. I mean, we know he's going to be convicted of everything.
Wow.
The trials are not yet over. Right now, he's in the middle of a trial for participating in a June 4th demonstration. Every year, Hong Kong people remember June 4th. That's when the tanks rolled in at Tiananmen Square. And China's been trying to erase the memory of June 4th, both in China and now in Hong Kong. So he's on trial for that. He still has these very serious national security charges that probably won't come until early next year. Once that's done, I hope there is pressure. But frankly, Father, one of the things that's really troubling is we haven't heard the Pope speak.
Yeah.
These there are a lot of Catholics in jail in Hong Kong, and not a word of support from the Vatican.
Yeah, I think we got to work on that for sure. This is, to me, a question you probably have a better answer for. If you read anything about many of our friends who were aware that Hitler was on the rise, and you see that they got out of Germany just in time, or out of Europe just in time, Jimmy had to know that because of what he had done, China would be gunning for him. Why did he stay?
Yeah, you put your finger on the key reason people respect this man. This is a billionaire. He has homes in Japan, Taiwan, Paris, I believe London. He could have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
But, and some people thought he should have, but people that said that, they don't know Jimmy Lai. He's not going to abandon the ship. I think he said recently that one of his guards asked him that question. Why didn't you go? Yeah. And he said, I'm a captain of the ship. I think there's 5 or 6 other people from his newspaper in jail with him. No one knows who they are. They're not as famous as he is. And how could he abandon them? So, that's what's attractive about this man, is that he lives his principles. It reminds me, there was a story many years ago in American Magazine, and it was about a Jesuit. He's still alive. I believe he's in the Holy Land. And he was a Vietnamese Jesuit. And he was a very young Jesuit in Rome in the 70s. And I believe it was Father Aribe, who was then head of the Jesuit order. Right. And as Saigon was falling, he told them, you have to go back. And the reason you have to go back is once it falls, no one's going to get in. So this young guy went back knowing he'll probably be jailed, right? He arrived in Saigon 2 days before it fell. And you can imagine the airport, just chaos, right?
People getting out.
Get out, right? And he's coming in. There's no one in the incoming line in the immigration. And the Vietnamese soldier who's like stamping the passports says, what are you doing coming back here? Why are you here when you were in Rome? And the Jesuit said to him, "Why are you here?" And he
Mm.
said, "I have no place to go." And the Jesuit said to him, "I'm here for you." And he wrote a remarkable story for America about how he kind of went on his ministry for 2 years, knowing he'd be arrested. He was arrested. He was put in jail. He continued his ministry in jail. Eventually was freed. I believe he's now in the Holy Land. But I think there are people that do these extraordinary things. And what's remarkable is how at peace they are with their own decisions. Like Jimmy has the consolation of knowing this is the right thing to do. You know, he's not sitting there thinking, I ran away. People were putting their faith in me and I saved myself at the expense of them. It's a tremendous consolation along with his faith, which is just growing stronger.
Please stay with us. We'll be back with more of our interview with writer Bill McGurn in just a moment.
Started drinking beer on Saturday nights, sleeping in on Sunday mornings, missing Mass, and it just became a pattern and continued. Without God, I don't know where I'd be right now. I feel like I'm whole again. I know the importance of the Eucharist. I know the importance of the sacraments that I didn't know at a young age. I follow God's will because my desire is to get to heaven. Our lives are rich and full by being members of the Church.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit catholicscomehome.org.
Welcome back to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr. Jim Lisante. I'm joined now by William McGurn. Bill is a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and he served as chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush. I want to switch gears a little bit to the more personal. Bill McGurn has mentioned that his first time in Hong Kong, he was single. Second time, he was married. So most weekends, as I celebrate weddings, I don't want to do a canned homily. So I say, do me a favor and write me an essay. Why, of the billion people out there, is this the one? You probably didn't have to do that for your wedding, but Bill, you know, it's an unbelievable decision to say, I'm going to make a lifelong commitment to this person. Why Julie?
Because she believed everything I believed. And, you know, I could sense that we complemented each other and that in areas where I needed correction or help, she'd be there. I mean, mostly we saw the world the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to go back to this with Jimmy Lai,
yeah,
you know, one reason he's so strong is his wife and their shared faith. It's not just that they're married. They share the most fundamental beliefs about human beings. Jimmy is by nature a fighter. He didn't finish high school. He came over as a refugee as a kid. He's a tough guy. When I lived in Hong Kong in the 90s, armed robbers came into his house and one of them tried to take his wife's wedding ring and he fought him. He got hit over the head with the pipe wrench, but the guy didn't get the ring. Jimmy's instinct is to fight. If he were a Marine and he were in a ditch and he was surrounded, he wouldn't put his hands up and come out. He'd put his bayonet on and charge, right? That's Jimmy's nature. But what has his wife done? His wife's strength is more a female strength of endurance. And when Jimmy went to prison, you can imagine for this woman probably inside hoping her husband would move away.
Yeah.
They would spare the family this and not go through it. But instead she told him, Jimmy, I'm your wife. I knew the day I married you, this day could come.
Wow.
And I will walk this path with you every step. But Jimmy, you have to embrace your cross.
Mm.
You know, that means being nice to the guard. You have to embrace this cross. And then you have to do in prison what we're all called to do, which is to be a saint.
Yeah.
And the extraordinary thing is that this proud, fighting man listens to her because of the faith. And a mutual friend of ours once said, if Jimmy didn't have his wife and his faith, you know, this marriage, he'd be like a bear in a cage, you know, living on hate and anger and raging against his chains. And he's not like that. And I like to think, you know, my wife's brought a lot of peace in my life just because we look at things the same way. I can have absolute trust in her. You know, and I was older when we got married, so I had a lot of people to compare her to. And, you know, and I you know, we fight a lot, right? But I know my wife's on my side. I know she's on God's side of trying to get us, you know, orient us in the right direction. And so I never I never have to worry whether it's raising the kids, whatever it is, when I'm not there. I never have to worry about my wife going off in another direction. We're on the same path.
Yeah.
And we're traveling, and it's just a better path when you have someone walking with you that shares your outlook and shares your belief.
Well, could you, we had Steve Matz, the pitcher who used to be with the Mets, now with Toronto, on recently. And before that, Kristen Chenoweth, the wonderful actress. But I had asked them, because they're kind of devout in their Christianity, could you have married someone who didn't believe in Jesus Christ? If Julie didn't share that vision, could you have married her?
I don't think so. I don't know. I mean, Teresa Lai is as strong a woman and devout as possible, and she married Jimmy, and he didn't have any belief. Then again, he wasn't hostile to belief.
Right.
He just didn't have it, and I think she saw as part of her mission to help him come to the faith, which she did. For my own sense, I mean, one reason I didn't marry until I was 33 is that I had never met anyone like my wife. She was very pro-life, Catholic, and also she was cheerful about it. She's a happy warrior. She's not a sullen person. She has a better personality than I do. For me, that would have been very hard, because I think of it. I know people, some of my friends who aren't Catholics and so forth, and I think of the big thing missing in their lives is communion with the other person, like full communion. If Julie weren't Catholic, I would love her as much as I love her today, all that, but we just wouldn't be quite in communion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an incredible, it's just an incredible thing to be in communion. We can't always explain it, but we feel it. And it's such a powerful aid, I think, in a wedding. It doesn't change the normal fights and stuff you're going to have. We have very different tastes and an awful lot of things. But I think that feeling of communion brings such an abiding sense of security to my life.
Okay, now it would be wonderful just to find that great wife and go on to live with her. But then you guys bravely, courageously decide to bring not one, not two, but three beautiful young girls from China into your life. Tell us about the decision to embrace the whole concept of adoption.
Well, I never really thought about adoption like a lot of people. I didn't know many adopted people growing up, mostly because when I was growing up, when people were adopted, they were the same race. So you wouldn't necessarily know unless they told you. And Julie and I were in Hong Kong, and we were just recently married, and we planned to have a family. And then there was a film, I don't know if it's a BBC, it was a British film called The Dying Rooms. And it was about China and how, because there's so many babies, a lot of them were just brought into these rooms to die. And, we just watched it, couldn't get it out of our mind. Again, we thought we were going to have natural children. And then, my wife just said to me, we can't save the world, but maybe we could, be a home for one of these. And at the same time, I had friends in the US that were adopted, and you get the picture.
Right.
And then you start saying, why not us? Right? We didn't really think of it. And it just kind of took a life of its own. And I know people in my family and my friends wondered, could they ever, could we ever relate to that child as though the child were ours biologically? And that all just melted away when we saw. And I used to worry about her. We put in this application, and we used to worry, where is she? Is she even born yet? And so forth. We didn't know. China doesn't give you a lot of information
right.
along the way. And we were at Christmas Eve in Manila, and we had all these worries. And I remember the priest, they had kind of a not quite life-size nativity set in front of the altar. And the priest, held aloft the bambino. And I'll tell you, at that moment, I just thought, God's in charge.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry.
Right.
My child will be taken care of. So she came. It's not a coincidence that our firstborn's name is Grace. That's the one thing we never had an argument about. We both agreed right away. And then when we got her, we we saw that her birthday was the day, it was the day after we filed the papers to adopt. So the day before we made our decision. So it sort of seems to me the day we made the decision to adopt, that's when Grace came in the world.
Wow.
And I always say the Lord does work in mysterious ways, but not always. And then once you do one, it was easier to do the others. I mean, if I had my brothers, I'd have 3 more if I could.
Yeah.
You know, I was older, so it became a little more complicated, and we came back to the U.S. by the time we got our 3rd. But it was really a beautiful experience. You know, and they're all individuals. We love them all equally, but they're all very different and so forth. And
so
and
they're not biologically all connected.
No, they're all from different parts of China. And I look at my life and I just think of how much poorer Julie and I would be if we didn't have these girls in my life. You know, it's just I can't imagine. They bring so much joy and richness. I mean, this is what adoption does. We just become like everyone else. We bore our friends with the same stories about everything. It's such a remarkable thing, and we forget. And one of the great stories is one of my nephews up in Boston. Somehow my brother and his wife were talking, and adoption came up, and he said, "Oh, you know, Grace and Maisie are adopted." And my nephew was like 9 or 10, said, "What? You know, they're Chinese," and he didn't realize they were adopted. But it's kind of nice because what it means is he saw the real relationship, and wasn't that it was love, not biology, that was in the driver's seat there. So, and we had another friend whose child had the same thing. Like, you're kidding me. It just tells you that kids sort of know. They know what's important.
Bill McGurn, for our watchers and listeners, has a number of his speeches online. And I was struck, Bill, by you were talking to college students who are pro-life, and you talked about the pro-life values of your own children and their faith as well. So I guess my natural question for you and Julie would be, do you have any insights for the many parents and grandparents who watch a show like this? Is there a right or wrong way to plant good seed in your kids when it comes to faith and values that last, like the sacredness of life?
I don't know a right or wrong way. I'd say Julie and I would say it came from our parents, who they didn't just teach us to be against abortion.
Yeah.
We both grew up in houses where we celebrated life. And what I mean, not just in the abstract, but babies. You know, babies were welcome. I grew up in a house. I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, right? And in that house, we just loved babies. You know, it was seen as a great gift, and so forth. And I think that contributed to it. You know, my dad was a Marine and an FBI agent, but my dad was very much ahead of his time. Like, when we had these babies, he said, "My sons are going to learn how to change diapers." We did. We didn't think it was beneath us, or what. You know, people just celebrated babies and associated them with great happiness. So, you know, in my experience, that's the kind of families that are pro-life. It also bleeds into the other end of life, how you treat old people, and so forth. So it bleeds into a lot of different things. But I think whether you see babies, you know, as bringing you as a source of your joy, and I think all my siblings, and I think all Julie's siblings, went into marriage thinking babies will be our fulfillment, not a burden that we carry, but a fulfillment of our real joy and so forth. And, you know, it's certainly true in our cases. You know, I can't imagine growing old without these, you know, young people around, and soon I hope grandchildren.
Bill, you know, I will close with less a question than a reminder. One of the guests we had, one of my favorite, was Governor Hugh Carey, and while he was in office as governor, he was pro-choice. But he obviously, for the rest of his life, was militantly pro-life and would always respond when we'd say, we need a speaker. But I asked him one day, I said, why? Why have you changed? What made you change? So many other Democrats, as you said, went the other way. They were pro-life, but they became pro-choice. And he said, well, Monsignor Jim, I'm getting older. I'm going to die and I'm going to face my God. He said, and my God's going to ask, you mean you knew all along that the right value was pro-life, but you, for the sake of political correctness, embraced choice? Oh, you Carrie, shame on you. And he said, I don't want to face God that way. So he said, I'm going to use the rest of my life to pronounce the message that life is sacred at every stage of its development. Wouldn't it be great if eucharism could spread to so many of our friends in politics, huh?
It does. Ronald Reagan was that. Ronald Reagan signed in the law liberalizing abortion in California.
Yes.
Went on to write Abortion in the Conscience of the Nations.
Yeah.
Dr. Nathanson, I think by his own account, performed 60,000 abortions, including of his own child. He became pro-life, became Catholic. In Roe versus Wade, the Jane Roe became, Norma McCovey became pro-life.
That's right.
So I think that's one of our commands. We can't give up on anyone.
No.
We got to pray for all of them. And there's so many, high life conversions of people that have changed. That we should have hope. We can do it. No one is beyond hope, beyond redemption.
Years ago, still, he's in his 90s now. One of my dearest friends is Ray Carrison, who wrote for the Post for many years. And he would say he was so grateful to Mr. Murdoch that he could be so out there when it comes to the sacredness of life. And he was never told to bring it on in. And to know that you're that voice out there in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere, Bill, you give me great and wonderful hope. So praying for you and Julie and Maisie, Lucy, and Grace. And I'll pray too for those grandchildren soon, Bill. All right.
Thank you very much. Very sweet.
Thanks for having us. We're so grateful. As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you have any comments to make, please send them to me at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You can get past episodes on YouTube by going to Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. And don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can get other past episodes by going to personallyspeakingpodcast.buzzsprout or www.closeencountertv.com or www.ollmp.org. Personally Speaking is also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. And now we're also on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.